doy acceso a los participantes, cierro mi cámara, pero cualquier cosa, aquí estoy.
Damos 5 minutitos y ya hago la introducción, ¿cierto? Perfecto. Few more minutes just to let the students arrive.
Yeah, for sure. How many classes are you teaching, Nuria?
This semester I'm not teaching because of my baby.
Oh yeah, of course.
But usually it's 3-4 groups. So yeah, I know most of the students from the art department, but the new ones I don't. So 2 more minutes and we can start.
And
So yeah, I'm very happy that now today is my first event with kid, with baby.
With baby? Oh yeah, it's a huge honor. Then. I like that.
So yeah.
It's a huge honor.
Very happy that have you here.
And how many of these lectures do you as a department end up organizing in a term?
I don't know. We can see the ones that have more experience. Okay, should we start? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, perfecto. I'm gonna start doing the introduction in Spanish, and then I will present your view, the one that you sent us. Ok, pues creo que ya estamos más o menos todos en la sala y esperemos vayan llegando quienes van un poquito más atrasados. Es un gusto muy, muy grande tener a Dylan esta tarde aquí con nosotros. Dylan es un artista que yo conocí en Chicago y su trabajo siempre ha sido para mí pues muy enriquecedor y es un gusto que él haya podido pues estar esta tarde aquí para compartirlo. También les agradezco a la UDLA que abra este espacio para generar estos cruces entre artistas de distintos contextos y lugares, al Departamento de Artes por gestionarlo y hacerlo posible y sobre todo pues a todas y a todos los estudiantes, al público que están hoy aquí para acompañarnos y para escuchar y ver el trabajo de Dylan. Al final de la presentación que él nos tiene preparadas, vamos a hacer un tiempo, como muchos de ustedes ya saben, para unos 10-15 minutos para preguntas y respuestas. Como saben, ahora la dinámica es, mandan por chat su pregunta y yo se la leo a Dylan, ¿no? Si viene en inglés o si está en español, bueno, si está en español hacemos la traducción. Me parece que en el chat está el aviso de privacidad, estas reuniones grabadas, sobre todo con fines de registro también de las actividades que realizamos en el departamento. Y bueno, les presento a Dylan. Dylan Fish. He was born in 1991 in St. Catherine, Ontario, Canada. He's a Chicago-based artist and a full merit scholar in the graduate program of Fiber and Material Studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He has received grants from the province of Nova Scotia, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, the Shapiro Center for Research and Collaboration, and the University of Chicago's Art, Science and Culture Initiative. He has exhibited in Canada, South Africa, Germany, the United States, and China. His work, Encrypted Archive 03.FFF, was featured in the 1919 Hangzhou Triennial of Fiber Arts and is now part of the permanent collection of the Zhenjiang Art Museum. Sorry, my pronunciation in Chinese that I don't know it.
I don't think mine's any better.
To China, but well, it's an honor, Dylan, to have you here. I give you the word so you can speak of your practice, and so happy to see you and to have this time to share your work with us.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you, Nuria, for the wonderful introduction and for inviting me to speak at UDLAP. For those of you who are unaware, I'm sure Nuria probably already mentioned it, but we actually used to share a studio wall in graduate school. And she was by far the happiest person in the entire block. So it was such a joy to have her on the other side. So it's very nice for me to be here tonight. My name's Dylan Fish. I am a Canadian artist. I'm now based out of Montreal, which is pretty recent. My lecture tonight will be an overview on the development of my practice since finishing my undergraduate studies at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design up until now, which I think should be of interest to a lot of you because I understand a lot of you are probably in that phase of your life right now. Okay, here we go. Oh, I wasn't in the right window. There we go. Much of the work that I make lies in the intersections and the boundaries of different art forms. It seems that this space is where I find much of my inspiration. It should be of no surprise then that this is also why I have made so much work on the Jacquard loom. It is a machine that is situated at the crossroads of textiles and technology, and it's a device whose innovation at the start of the 19th century would revolutionize the technology and the technological developments and marvels that came to define the modern era. The first time I saw photographic Jacquard weaving, I was completely mesmerized by it. For most of my undergraduate studies, I was focused on painting and drawing. And as an image maker, I had no idea how this image was made. I could tell that it wasn't drawn or painted, but rather that it was woven. And I knew that this was something I immediately had to learn how to do. The more I learned about the history of the machine, the more I knew it was actually the perfect tool to sort of explore and examine the technology that had come to define my life as a millennial and a young adult, inundated with the technology of my age, which was social media. The Jacquard weaving that you are looking at now, over here, this Jacquard weaving was actually the first weaving that I ever made. My work was completely full of broken threads, sloppy errors, and it was permeated with T-pins. But I actually really liked the mistakes. I felt that they reminded viewers that this was handmade, that it was a weaving, and that it was composed of black and white threads, not an image that was painted, printed, or drawn onto the surface. Sorry, I'm jumping around. All the images used in this body of work were appropriated from real Facebook profiles, some from people that I knew and some from completely random strangers. And what I was trying to do was push the lines of what was seen as public and private space online. The raw quality of the work captured the rawness of the images that I was producing, and the process of weaving and its slow nature stood in stark contrast to the fast-paced and disposable nature of the images that were being shared online. This work at first glance depicts a party taken off of a Facebook user's profile, but in reality, it's a composite of several parties. Using Photoshop, complete strangers were from different images were digitally stitched into one party of people that do not actually know each other in real life. In this way, the work becomes basically a metaphor for social media in and of itself. On the far left-hand side of the image, a balloon breaks through the internet browser, highlighting the fact that this image has actually been altered and that things are not exactly as they appear. If a viewer is able to identify that the images have been manipulated, then they must also question what else in the exhibition has been altered. Where does one's perception diverge from reality? And can anyone experience meaningful and genuine forms of reality online? Is this a harmless demonstration of deepfake technology yet to come? These were the kinds of questions that I was really interested in. Here we see an installation view of my first solo exhibition. It was entitled Social Fabric. The exhibition took place at NSCAD University's Anna Leonowens Gallery. The work being exhibited in a university gallery in some ways also took on a form of institutional critique. Facebook had started as a university platform geared towards college kids uploading these types of images online as a sort of digital yearbook. But with all the partying, one begins to wonder really what is being learned in a university after all. This type of mentality has actually made higher level education in North America more and more expensive. Institutions build facilities so that they may appeal to more affluent students who are shopping for schools based on the kinds of amenities that they offer and the kind of lifestyle that the institution provides. The more post-secondary education has actually shifted in this direction, the greater the costs have become for students themselves and the less emphasis that's actually been placed on learning and education. This is another installation view. Just to give you a sense of scale, the weaving on the far left is 2 meters in height. With these two pieces, I wanted the work to look and feel religious. A halo of flash, basically a tribute to oneself, like an iconography painting or an icon painting. In the exhibition, these two weavings were placed directly across from the next work. And basically, you know, by having those two images curated across from this piece, what I wanted to do was I wanted to make the image of the man photographing himself in the mirror actually kind of almost appear as if he was photographing the scene in this image. The question I want to ask is who's behind the camera of these pictures? Presumably it's the same person that chooses to upload them in the first place. And whether or not you're taking photos, that doesn't, or whether or not you choose to engage with social media, it doesn't necessarily mean you're consenting to all the images that are posted of you online, which was something that I was kind of also interested in. The viewer in the gallery takes on the role of a voyeur as they're flipping through these photos. And in this work, the woman on the left is actually rewoven kissing herself on the panel on the right. The mirroring in turn makes a Rorschach ink blot. This work, entitled Little Country Boy Heart, depicts a photo album uploaded by a mother of her son. The boy is posed to look like a cowboy hero. At the top of the weaving, the web browser has tabs to the mass multiplayer online game, or MMO, Second Life. The game is famous for allowing players to create an avatar and live a fantasy life online, as is the case of many MMO games. But many players enjoy the game because it is an escape from reality. Many people end up becoming more absorbed in their Second Life avatar than the real world around them. And with this work, I was interested in the idea of role play and where that desire really comes from. Is it instilled in us from a young age? or as it's being done in this photo album here, or rather does it emerge out of maybe a general unhappiness with one's own sense of self or the world around them in the real life? On the right-hand side of the piece are advertisements. And while social media allows us to share our photos online with friends and family, it's also strange to think that we can no longer experience this content without advertisements. I'm interested in the cross-reading of how these advertisements change how we view our personal pictures. And now I think a lot more of us are becoming aware of the fact that as users of social media, we actually are the product that's being sold to advertisers for ad revenue, which is also doubly interesting. Another big question that I was really trying to ask is like, who has access to this stuff? Because, you know, I don't actually know this woman in real life. And is it not problematic or weird that I could actually access photos of this kind and of her and her child? The work in many ways shows that nothing that we post online will ever truly be private, for better or for worse. This work, entitled Comment Thread 001, is a pun. In English, we call a digital text that accompanies an image a message thread or a comment thread. Of course, here as a jacquard weaving, the words are presented using actual thread. By separating the image from the text, the viewers must read the work in order to imagine what kind of picture is being commented on. This particular photo had a very controversial subject matter, and so it drew 53 comments and only 1 like. In many ways, though, reading the comments and not seeing the image makes the work even more enticing. Viewers who read the comments can't help but ask, what is the person in this photograph doing? More importantly, it also shows how language is actually changing. People use abbreviations so they can convey more with fewer words and a wider range of emotions in sometimes only a few letters. One of my major interests in digital culture as an artist is how language that we use is changing and evolving in its mediation through technology. This way of thinking is really kind of what led to the development of my project, #Justice. One of the more interesting aspects of language online is the advent of the hashtag. Hashtags, of course, allow us to search content by keywords or phrases through platforms like Twitter. And now we can see how a word or phrase is being used online around the world in real time, or even how the word evolves over time. This project was part of a group show around social justice and youth culture, and it was hosted by the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. This work presents a homemade LED sign that reads any tweet tagged justice. By reading the sign, viewers get a glimpse into the many battles of social justice being fought all over the world. Simultaneously, the work encourages viewers in the museum to engage in a greater dialogue and discourse through social media by actually logging into Twitter and writing what justice means to them, simply so they can see their tweet come up on the sign. Very sadly, this project was actually up when Michael Brown was fatally shot in Ferguson, and it ended up becoming a lightning rod of texts out of Ferguson, because it was the same summer. This project was really my first time working with electronics, and I had, technically speaking, no idea what I was doing. So I approached the Halifax Makerspace for help. This is Peter Frank Spierenberg, who was incredibly generous with his time and knowledge in helping me realize my idea. And without him and the Halifax Makerspace, there is no way that this project ever would have gotten off the ground. So, and it really was my first introduction into working with these materials, which are now a major part of my practice today. By the time I got to graduate school, this piece was really the first project that I fully realized. This piece is entitled X Key Score. Oops. And when I did the Justice Project in Halifax, I was really intrigued by seeing all the information scrolling across each individual LED array. And I thought that I could make for a different kind of project just by limiting the number of arrays to one. I was thinking of these signs as expressing ideas of transparency and the nature of how they look and the information that they display. And at the same time, by limiting the amount of pixel arrays, they challenged a person's ability to read the information, and they became an exercise in patience, making them sort of opaque as well. I thought that this dichotomy lent itself really well to exploring the Edward Snowden revelations around government surveillance and the privacy security debate, which had sort of blown up in the headlines around that point in time. Documents leaked by whistleblowers have exposed the panoptic nature of the internet and the extent of global surveillance that we are subjected to daily, whether or not we know or really care about it. As governments and private corporations profit off of personal data and private information, both politically and economically, transparency becomes vital in holding institutions accountable for their actions. X Key Score is a tiny transparent sign that presents a primary source document of the same name leaked by Edward Snowden. This transparent sign challenges viewers to give it their full attention by slowing the process of reading down. What is enticing at first becomes more and more mundane. And not before long, most people who come to view this work move on and forget about it, much like the actual revelations themselves. This project entitled Jacquard GIF, it was building off of the skills that I was developing as I was exploring electronics and Arduino boards. And this time I really tried to set out to combine that with Jacquard woven cloth. I was really fascinated with pre-cinematic zoetropes and old forms of animation. And I saw a direct connection between how they were animating and the digital phenomenon of GIFs or GIFs. So what I tried to do was I tried to create a physical GIF out of Jacquard woven cloth. Again, this was sort of like an evolution out of the Facebook weavings that I had first sort of started to explore. The goal of the project was really to animate Jacquard woven cloth in a physical space to create a GIF-like animation in the real world. The rotation of the motor was used to activate a modified umbrella swift that the weavings were attached to, and as the motor spun the umbrella, a strobe light flashed in bursts of light to create a stroboscopic animation resembling a GIF. The image of the two women were once again taken off of Facebook. They had set up photo timer of themselves. And so I used that as a way of kind of creating an atmosphere like a club, because of course, when you're in a dark room and the lights are flashing with the strobe light, the viewers actually become animated in the space as well. And what I was trying to do again was connect pre-cinematic animation to contemporary GIF animations. After spending a ton of time in my studio, learning how to weave and work with textiles and electronics, I really had a strong desire to return to painting, which is actually where I had started out to begin with. But I wanted to approach the practice in a new way. So I ended up pouring long strips of paint on plastic. And essentially what I was doing was creating yarn that I could knit and crochet with. And these works I began to call off-loom paintings, named for the off-loom structures that were holding them together. The conversations in painting it as a medium throughout the 20th century were often largely to do with surface and support, surface being the paint itself and support being the canvas or any other material that the paint sits on top of. For me, what was interesting about this work was that the surface of the paint ultimately became its own support structure through the possibilities of knit and crochet forms. The weight of the paint in these forms had a gravity to it, and the work looked both liquid and solid and was incredibly satisfying to play with and to look at. While in graduate school, I decided to really try and take this idea one step further because this was something that I had explored before entering graduate school. And I tried to take this process and engage others with the medium of fiber art in more of a participatory manner. For this project, I had been curated into a show at SAIC's Sullivan Galleries called Painting in Time, Part 2, curated by Sarah Kate Wilson and Claire Ashley. The show sought to explore painting in the expanded field, to showcase essentially what painting might look like beyond the traditional notions of the medium. So I set to work manufacturing balls of yarn out of paint. For several months, I would pour the paint, let it dry, spin it into yarn, ball it up on a ball winder. Over the duration of the exhibition, I would continually populate the shelf with this paint yarn, and I would invite viewers to knit, not crochet the yarn onto a group of powder-coated hooks that I installed on a nearby wall. These photos were taken during the opening day of the exhibition. And here you can see how the work developed over the duration of the exhibition. People had a lot of fun with it. It was also nice for me because as serious as I am about a lot of the art that I make, I also feel that art doesn't always have to be so serious. And sometimes that's actually really wonderful as well. Something that I love about fiber art in general is that it brings people together socially. In many ways, an activity like a knitting circle or a sewing circle is a kind of polar opposite to an online forum. All of the interactions of a knitting circle are face-to-face. People are present in real life with one another, and it's these types of spaces that can engage critical discourse in a more meaningful way as opposed to the anonymous nature of the internet, which has proven to be actually quite toxic and horrifying, as we've come to learn. So as part of the exhibition, I hosted 3 workshops. One workshop I gave to an intro painting course. One workshop was presented to a fiber course. And finally, I also hosted a knitting circle, which this poster is advertising. Here's a photo from the Intro to Fiber workshop. All the students had just learned how to crochet earlier that day, and they made a very quick work of what was poured for them. So over the course of my studies at graduate school, I ended up applying and receiving a grant from the University of Chicago to collaborate on a project with Daniel Johnstone, who was doing his PhD in mathematics. Daniel and I actually knew each other from high school. And when I moved to Chicago, we got back in touch because he was still pursuing his PhD at the time. And I came across the grant and I proposed the project to work with one another. And he was totally up for it. So we ended up working in what became working together towards this work. I was still thinking about issues around digital privacy, you know, in the wake of the Snowden revelations and, you know, kind of like the anxieties that I had with images online. And when I returned to Jacquard, this time with Daniel as a collaborator, I began to start thinking about how the loom could be used not only as a means to present images depicting information, but rather as an information storage device altogether. So as a team, Daniel and I devised a way of using jacquard weaving as a means of storing encrypted data into cloth. This work was one of our first hand-woven proof of concept pieces. So I know that sounds pretty abstract, So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how it works and what that really means. Basically, you can take any type of file, whether it's a message, a video, an image, or anything else. And in this case, a friend of mine provided me with this message in Korean. So this is our file. Now, when we open up the Python script that Daniel ended up writing for the project, we can open this file and read it in the program. And essentially, the program operates as a lock mechanism. It opens the file, encrypts it into a scrambled version of ones and zeros, and it generates a decryption key that would be necessary to revert the file back into its original state. So that's essentially what this looks like. On the left, you have the ones and zeros that have been scrambled. That's the binary data of the file now encrypted. And on the right, you have your decryption key, which is the private key number that you need to unlock your scrambled document. A final program would then take that file, that scrambled information, and convert it into black and white pixels, which we could then import into weaving software and have woven on a loom. So now the document's in this structure, and that gets converted into our software, which we can then weave. So essentially what you're looking at here is a locked document. This is sort of what the project culminated in. On the left, you can see a detail of binary information inside of the textile. And on the right, you can see the final textile now woven at an industrial mill. Once Daniel and I figured out how to create encrypted weave drafts in this format, the process became very easy to scale at an industrial, in an industrial manner. The larger the textile, the more files you can fit on it. And the final weaving was made 50 yards long, and it stored a total of 19 different files, including a message from Nuria. I'm not even sure Nuria remembers that she gave me a message. So now, in order to present the encryption keys, I needed another way to communicate the information visually. So I decided to convey this information using light. To do this, essentially, I created a Morse code library through Arduino's IDE platform and programmed an Arduino Duo board to pulse each private key signal to a corresponding light. What I like about this is that everything you need to decrypt the files is right in front of you, hiding in plain sight like quipu knots from the Quechua people, and yet it remains completely inaccessible for now as an encrypted archive, because the amount of effort that it would take to convert this back into information that we would recognize would take a considerable amount of work. This is me and Daniel at the night of SAIC's thesis exhibition opening. So this is the first major project that I did after graduate school. Strangely enough, it's still exploring encryption, although it ended up exploring encryption through cryptocurrencies, essentially digital currencies made possible by encryption algorithms. So that's kind of the jump that I ended up making after graduate school. In 2015, I was invited to participate in an art festival called the Unlock Summer Series in the town of Lockport, Illinois. The art festival was being funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and it was being hosted by the Gaylord Building Museum as well as the Illinois State Museum. There was a call for proposals put out for artists to submit a public work of art that engaged with local history, industry, and essentially, shops in the area. Upon researching the history of the area, I learned that the historic canal town of Lockport actually played a vital role in the economic development of the city of Chicago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that right now. In the early 1800s, Chicago was just a small settlement on the southeastern end of Lake Michigan. Settler Gordon Hubbard described it in the 1830s as being no bigger than 4.5 houses and a fort and a Potawatomi town. So it was largely just a native settlement and a fort. In the early 1800s, there was a massive demand essentially to connect the St. Lawrence Seaway to the Mississippi River, which are the two red lines on this map. The fastest way to move large quantities of goods was by water as opposed to land, and shipping goods along the east coast of the continent was expensive to insure due to bad weather and piracy, which was completely rampant at the time. People knew that if there was an interior waterway that they could connect New York to New Orleans, then there would be vast fortunes that they could make. And this meant that whatever settlement along the Great Lakes could make the connection first would soon reap the rewards 10 times over, because the canal lands would become so profitable to control. The only problem with connecting the little settlement of Chicago was approximately 92 miles of land blocking Lake Michigan from the Illinois River, which could then dump freely into the Mississippi. On the left is an actual map of Illinois from the pre-canal era. In the map, one can see that the original state border of Illinois was completely landlocked. Developers of the canal fought to move the border north so that they could connect the canal to the pre-Chicago settlement at the mouth of Lake Michigan, thereby keeping the canal entirely within the state of Illinois. On the right is an image of the current Illinois border, which does indeed connect to Lake Michigan and demonstrates that the efforts of those trying to develop the canal entirely in one state were in fact successful. This document from 1827 is an act put forth by the federal government granting the proposed land to the state of Illinois, solidifying the current state border as shown in the previous slide. Construction on the canal, however, would not actually begin for another decade. Nearly 10 years later, in 1836, when construction on the I&M Canal started, it was all basically manual labor. However, it proved to be far more expensive than any investor could have predicted. Much of the costs stemmed from the fact that the canal was dug out with shovels and people, and the labor was mostly brought over from Europe in the form of very poor Irish immigrants. Furthermore, the land was covered in very cumbersome limestone deposits, and this limestone would actually be brought to Chicago and the surrounding areas, and now to this day comprises some of the oldest buildings in the city of Chicago and the greater Chicago area. So it actually had an impact on the landscape in more ways than one. As a result of the growing costs, commissioners of the canal amassed incredible debts, and by 1839, they would have to start issuing their own paper currency known as canal scrip. The local currency acted as a form of credit that promised to become payable once funds from the canal became available upon its completion. Given that the canal would not be completed until 1848, canal scripts value traded for as low as 15 cents on the dollar in the open market, but could be used at face value to purchase canal lands. Laborers were only paid 1 canal scrip a day, which was the equivalent of about 10 cents. Investors with money saw a huge opportunity in buying out large sums of canal scrip with the hope of gaining a return on their investment. And in true Illinois fashion, the governor of the time was found to have stolen like chests of this stuff. So some things never change. The completion of the canal would indeed see massive returns for those who bought out canal scrip at its lowest, because the canal became the key connector between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River, and one of the most important economic trade routes in the continent. In fact, without Lockport and the I&M Canal, Chicago never really would have become the city that it is today. And therefore, without canal strip, the canal never would have been completed, and we wouldn't have Chicago without this piece of paper. Now, what I find really interesting about that is that now that we're in this era of cryptocurrencies, they kind of operate in the same manner as being speculative forms of value. So my proposal was essentially to launch a cryptocurrency in the town of Lockport commemorating canal script. In order to celebrate canal script, we launched a limited edition cryptocurrency called Blockcoin. And once again, I was working with Daniel Johnstone from the previous project. And this time I brought in another friend, Stefan Glavatsky. We released a total of 1848 collectible digital tokens on the blockchain network. And we released 1848 because that was the year that the canal was completed. The hope of the project was to, well, you know what, I think I went, here we go. Sorry, I went one too far. The hope of the project was to try and create a new locally issued cryptocurrency in the town of Lockport, and to see if it could actually gain traction within the economy of Lockport. So for instance, you know, you release this token and its entire value is based on the fact that it's art, which I also find really fascinating. So are people willing to spend money on absolutely nothing just because it's art and art tied to this festival? Now, to promote the project, the cryptocurrency was launched from inside the First National Bank of Lockport, alongside this 10-channel video installation. So this was the former bank, but it had since turned into a wine bar. So the festival allowed us to use it as a space to release the project. So in order to make that happen, we set up a website, and basically people in the town visiting the festival could go to the website and figure out, you know, what it is, how to buy it, where to buy it, and essentially who we are, and learn about the project, and in doing so, learn about the history of their area while they were at it. Hold on. This a little, there we go. So in order to kind of convince people to buy this stuff, what we did was we released some limited edition tchotchke, like, you know, business junk with our branding all over it. And the idea was that the only way you could buy our swag was if you bought Blockcoin. So you'd buy Blockcoin at the museum, and then you'd go to the different shops in town, and each shop had, we worked with 3 different shops, and the idea was like, you know, the local dress store had these t-shirts, and the local bar had shot glasses, and, you know, the cafe had mugs, etc. So the idea was, you know, there was an incentive there to actually buy the product, buy this stuff, and at the same time actually visit local shops in town and stimulate the real economy in addition to our crypto economy. In truth, I think it was a little ahead of its time, and it didn't really, I think it was a little confusing to a lot of people, but I think it was really fun and people enjoyed it anyway. And the truth is that it really was a success in the sense that it still got people going into those places that probably wouldn't have otherwise gone there anyway. So I'll call that a win. So these are the manuals that we made for the exchange, and essentially guiding people how to go through the process. And here's the information about the project and the history of canal script. So I'll move on from that. So sometime after Blockcoin, I ended up getting invited to exhibit, to represent my thesis project from graduate school at the 2019 Triennial of Fiber Art in Hangzhou, China. The exhibition was to be a major survey of fiber art from around the world, and I was really quite extraordinarily lucky to have been contacted by one of the curators to include my piece in this major survey. I was really excited at the prospect of presenting the same project inside of China, because I felt like the conversation around censorship in China is obviously a very big issue. And I felt that the work would take on a new meaning within this context, given that it's entirely about encryption. The curators wanted me to add a new component to the work to help visitors better understand my project for obvious reasons. So they commissioned me to create an interactive component as well to enhance viewer engagement with the work, and so that people could kind of better wrap their minds around the piece in the space. This is the Zhejiang Art Museum, which is where my work was exhibited at the Triennial, and the same institution has since purchased it as well, which is really quite flattering. In order to install the piece in the new museum, I had a lot of challenges to overcome, because even though I had already made this work once in the past, bringing it to a new location is like a completely different animal. So I had to build out a new interactive component. I had to figure out how to ship the work safely without breaking. I had to figure out how to transfer the voltage ratings from what's commonly used in China, 220, to North America, 120, because all of my electrical components were made for use in North America. And it seemed like I was basically in for one headache after another throughout this process. One of the major issues was that the Triennial was only going to give me 10 days to install my project. And I had previously taken probably over 20 days to install the first time around in Chicago. And I knew that I was kind of in for hell, for lack of a better word. They were going to give me a team of student helpers, but for the very beginning, we were only allowed to be in the museum during regular hours, 9 to 5, and the whole museum shut down at lunch for break. So we're talking about a very small window of time to actually do anything. And as it was getting closer, the curators realized, oh, they really do need more time. I don't know why they thought that we wouldn't, but they started letting us in at night. And so most of the time we were there was just like all around the clock, and they had to pay for extra security guards just to like be there so that we could install this work at like these god awful hours in the morning. But you know, they got their lunch break. So there you go. I also knew going into this that one of the biggest pitfalls was essentially going to be the language barrier, and that, you know, any type of miscommunication in making a project like this, you know, a reality, could be just a huge disaster, because there's so much involved, like a lot of weight, loads, live loads, electrical voltage being converted and hanging like arguably flammable material. So, you know, there was a lot involved, and it became very clear early on that I needed to make a step-by-step instruction manual with architectural drawings and cross sections for the installation team to use as a reference, and for me to use to help explain to everybody how the installation was put together, because everything was basically just inside of my head. Fortunately, my girlfriend, Juliet, who you saw run by the camera, is actually trained as an architect. Huge luck, big win. my brother as well is also an architect, so I seem to be very fortunate. I'm surrounded myself with very competent, capable people, and I ended up spending a great amount of time working with Juliet specifically to produce this instruction manual in detail and to scale, to actually realize the project overseas. The museum agreed to fly me and one other person. So I asked my friend Stefan from Blockcoin to join me if he was interested in a new adventure and a free flight to China. And he said, why not? Let's do it, which is great. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done without him. Again, like if I had not had his help and the help of my student volunteers, there's absolutely zero chance that this installation would have gone up at all. So I was incredibly lucky to have him there and everyone else. On the left, you can see the installation space before we did anything to it. So this is, the calm before the storm. They had set up an apparatus for us to suspend the structure from, which is this sort of black grid that you can see in the space. They laid felt on the floor so that we wouldn't damage their floor. And then we got some coffee and we went to work. Here on the left, you can actually see the interactive component, which ended up consisting of a website that viewers could submit messages to. The website collected the message that the viewer submitted, and it displayed it to the viewer in the encrypted format that was weavable in cloth. As a thank you for submitting a message into the database, viewers were then given a receipt with a copy of their message. And this aspect of the work was made entirely possible by another artist and a friend of mine named Ame Kataria, who specializes in creative code and web-based work. So again, I leaned on other friends to try and make these things happen. This is Ame. I'm not sure he would like me using this particular screenshot of him, but it's what I have. This is kind of really like the basis of my interactions, pulling this project together, working with different people. In the case of Ame, we would be doing lots of Zoom sessions together, troubleshooting problems for the installation and the interactivity of the work, and also trying to get him to understand from my side of things, like how our former code worked and how important it was to get certain things outputting correctly so that the loom could actually weave the messages later down the road. So it was amazing to work with him, and it really ended up turning out to be quite a big success, fortunately. So here is the website. So the website is called encryptionarchive.net. I really like the .net. Early websites used to end in .net, and it was seen as a nice alternative to .com. .com actually means .commerce, which implies that the internet is a place for only making money. But .net sort of is a more, I guess, utopian idea of what the internet really is. And of course, it's a textile pun, so who doesn't like that? So viewers essentially submit a message into the website. This is a George Orwell quote that I think is actually very appropriate in the context of the work. And there's the encrypted format that the loom can now read. So there's the website on the computer, the receipts as the sort of thank you for submitting a message, and the final installation. Oh, hold on. Can you guys, I'm just realizing that I guess you guys see over here these windows instead of my screen.
No, we see your screen.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
There's the final installations on the right. There's Juliet on the left, the architect who made all those drawings possible. Countless volunteer hours bled into this. And Stefan on the right and me in the middle. This is at the opening day. And this is my incredible team of volunteers. Again, you know, absolutely none of this would have been possible without everyone's help. Pictured from left to right are me and Stefan, and for the volunteers, they're Lu Tianyu, Pan Yu Shan, Ma Jiayu, Shen Bingsheng, and not pictured Zhuang Qingnao. And I really apologize that I know I completely butchered all those names, but it's still important to me to mention them because of how much work they gave into this this installation. It was a really big job, and they were the best. And not in this picture as well as Jai Chan Liu, a dear friend of mine who played a major role in making all of this possible. And she's actually the person that introduced my work to the curator to begin with. So big shout out to her. Here's again, the final piece now in the museum. It looked so much better than in the Sullivan galleries, because in the SAIC space, you know, and this is kind of a valuable lesson for all of you artists out there. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for this exhibition, and they basically curated me into the hallway. And I thought, oh, what a terrible space this is, the hallway. It was not at all what I wanted to do. Wasn't what I wanted to use. And then in the end, I ended up coming up with some format where people could walk underneath it. And the sculpture really evolved from my limitations. And because of that, now I seem to have found a niche where there's all sorts of curators that have terrible hallway spaces that they want something in, but they don't know what to put there. And then they see this work and they go, that'll look good in my hallway. So, you know, sometimes it's not so bad to not get what you're hoping for or what you want, as long as you make the most of it and you think about kind of like how to make the best of a bad situation. And if you can really achieve that, you can end up way further ahead than you might have thought. Possible, like, you know, anyway, there you go. But I guess what I was saying is that it was really nice to see this work, which had been designed for a hallway, now in a space a little bit wider than that you could actually sort of walk around it and view it from. And again, these are all still photos, but the installation would periodically blink in certain intervals. All of the neon lights, again, would flash the decryption keys. The exhibition itself was originally supposed to run from November 26th, 2019 until February 9th, 2020. Now, these are very major dates because due to the sudden outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the exhibition ended up being extended even longer. So I had just installed this piece inside of a major Chinese museum and then left China, and then COVID happened almost right after. So the timing was really quite bizarre. But what that means for the work is essentially that, you know, significantly, all of the encrypted messages that I ended up collecting in Hangzhou through my database inside of China were submitted before, during, and after the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis as it was unfolding. And in total, I ended up collecting somewhere around 5,000 messages during this period of time. And the pandemic brought, you know, a great amount of upheaval, obviously, in everybody's lives. And personally, it resulted in my move back to Canada with Juliet, who's also Canadian. And that's how we ended up in Montreal from Chicago. So it was a pretty big period of upheaval in my own life, but I am very grateful and thankful for, you know, everything. I think something, you know, a pandemic and something like this really reminds us of what's important in life. And, you know, yeah, I am just grateful. So anyway, during this period of time, I was approached by the China Design Museum to make a new work for an upcoming exhibition. And this was kind of being talked about, like, as far as I'm aware, before COVID started, but I got contacted after I was already back and after things were kind of happening. And when I was contacted for this exhibition and officially offered the invitation, I knew right away that I wanted to weave all of the messages that I received in my database online, and that I wanted to make the work a sort of memorial to the pandemic. So all of the colors and the context changed again. So, and I wanted this new work to have a very different feel to it, even though it was going to be more or less the same kind of idea. So everything switched to red and gold, and you know, again, a new shape and a new structure. And this time, actually, I was able to realize the shape that I had originally wanted to do to begin with, which was something more vertical. Now, the really fascinating thing about this installation is that I'm in Canada and the exhibition's in China, and I can't go there. And it's a new work. So for the first time in my life, I had to, I'm facing even more restrictions than I could have ever imagined, because everything has to be done remotely. So I had to oversee the design, the creation, and installation of this major work without actually touching anything. And, you know, this is like a super bizarre problem, and it's a huge leap for me in terms of moving my practice again, like one step further, like away from making stuff, which I think is really how we all start making art, generally speaking. At least it's how I started. And, you know, I couldn't even, I'm such a visual person, I couldn't even visit the gallery space. So what we did was Juliet, again, came to my rescue, and we took all of the dimensions of the gallery and we created a 3D model in Google SketchUp. And we essentially created the installation using architectural software. And this is free software, by the way. So, you know, if you guys are ever planning on doing stuff like this, it's great if you can like figure it out, because it's incredible what you can do now, right? So we used this software to essentially model my exhibition space, and then we could determine the exact parameters that we needed for, you know, how high the fabric could be hung, what it was going to look like, how it was going to fit in the space, whether or not people could walk around it, you know, everything from distances to the ceiling, distances to the structures. So we were able to visualize it all virtually in 3D before actually turning out drawings that we could then send, and manuals that we could send to the museum and the new installation crew. So again, here's sort of another view of what that model looks like. You can see the lights are kind of these staple shapes, and the cloth, which is now going to be red, is vertically hung. And there it is in real life. So, you know, blows my mind. You know, I never would have thought that something like this would come together. And I'm not going to lie, like, there were so many problems that came up. There were so many, you know, because the time zone's completely opposite. I would have to be up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, problem solving electrical issues and calling Stefan, who was in Poland. And like, we would work together on thinking of, you know, ways around whatever issues were arriving. And we even ended up during the day of the installation, we took shifts where I would I would be up for one section of the night. And then as it was becoming morning in his time zone, he would get up and he would take over problem solving, so that at all times, one of us was there to kind of sort of steward our installation team or be available if a huge issue came up. But, you know, in the end, it all ended up working out. And as far as I'm concerned, it's nothing short of a miracle. That's the crew that was on the ground. Sitong in the middle is really, she's the one who made it all possible. And she's now actually at SAIC's Fiber and Material Studies program. So that's pretty cool. She was basically my go-to person. I would talk to her, I'd message her, I would say, hey, we need to order this, we need that, like, you need to get over there, like, how's the textile being made? You know, she would go to the factory for me, she would, you know, do everything. So it was really kind of an amazing experience to have somebody as capable and as helpful as her helping. And this also kind of funny enough, this is the opening. So it was a COVID opening, and I actually got brought around. You can see Juliet and I are in the bottom left corner on FaceTime. She brought me around the opening on a phone. And it was the first opening I've ever gone to, you know, like one of the biggest exhibitions I've probably ever had in my life, and I'm experiencing it on a little phone. So, you know, it's been strange new world, I guess. And also pictured in this image is her boyfriend and Chen Bing Sheng, who helped out. He's in the background. He helped out with the fiber triennial installation. So he knew what he was doing as well, to a certain extent. So that was great to have him there too. There's another detail photo. Again, I can't take photos or documentation of anything. So it's kind of bizarre to feel helpless that way. Like, you know, I'm sort of completely reliant on other people. And this is the only video documentation I have of the work. But I'm going to let it play out so that you can get a sense of what these installations are actually like in real life, you know, with their animation and everything. So, you know, the experience, this is the only way I've been able to experience the work too. So kind of bizarre in that regard. And in case you're wondering, all of my work now seems to be happening just out of my desk here. This is my studio, and you know, it's just a computer screen and a comfortable desk and a chair. And half the time I have to work another job on the computer as well. So that is, yeah, I guess pretty much it. I'll just let this video play out a little bit so you can watch it. And then I guess we'll field some questions.
Yes.
They didn't refresh the screen here, so the website looked a little funny. But, you know, there it is. Here we go, it's about to animate. So again, all the lights are basically flashing the private key numbers that you would need to open up each individual message. So everything you need to open up the information is there in the installation. It's just, you know, good luck getting at it. And I think that raises, you know, for me, a lot of interesting questions on like how and why we store data. How far would you go in terms of storing information without actually having, you know, access to it online at all times? What are the benefits of analog storage, and maybe how might you see that in the future if we live in a world where everything we do is being monitored and watched by others, or by, you know, power structures that are out of our control? You know, how might we look back at analog technology to offer us solutions to the future? And I think for me, that's really kind of what boils down to my interest in textiles and sort of antiquated technologies, and like why, past histories, like even in the case of the canal script and the block coin project, play such a large role in how we really should think about what we're doing today and in the future. So muchas gracias. Thank you so much, everybody. And
thank you,
pass it
Dylan.
away.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think for me, it was a great pleasure to see all your process. And I hope that for our public, our students, to see the evolution of your work, like from the first university show that of the Facebook textiles till this very, very recent project, like all the changes and all the evolutions that you have basically done, no? I will open the Q&A with a question, and then I will pass the mic to our audience. Remember, please, public, that your questions, you write it through our chat, and then I will read it to Dylan, no? So just to warm up the room, I would like to start. Basically, there are many things that like seeing your work comes to my mind. But the first one that for me is very interesting is your partnership, your collaboration with other minds, no? With the mathematicians, with the architects, like all these collaborations that really makes the work possible, no? Like, as you say, maybe you don't know how to do the encoding, but then how you make like these partnerships to make the work, the ideas possible, no? And I would like if you could talk to us more about how the collaborations have been an important part, a role in your process, and how like this collaboration have with scientists, with architects, have like really expanded, no, your work, your practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned, and like at the very beginning of the lecture, I started off as an artist who, loved drawing and painting. And I remember I was in undergraduate studies, and I was a little obsessed with painting things photorealistically. And a professor of mine said, Dylan, why don't you just pick up a camera? Like, who cares? And it kind of blew my mind because I didn't have a really good reason for doing what I was doing. I didn't have any justifications. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I liked doing it. I was pretty good at doing it, but I realized, the more engaged I became with art, critically speaking, I was interested in work that, like, I didn't know what to paint because I wasn't really interested in painting anything in particular, even though I loved the act of painting. And so my practice kind of had to evolve that way. And I needed to look outwards as to like what was going on in the world in order to reflect something more, I think, true and relevant within my own practice that other people could take meaning from, or learn from, or experience in a way that would be more engaging or more interesting than what I was previously doing. And just by virtue of the fact that I'd spent like my whole life painting and drawing, all of a sudden you decide, well, I guess I'm going to become a media artist. Where do you start? It's really overwhelming. So, you start with ideas, and then you think, okay, here's an idea that I really like. I think this is interesting and it makes sense to me. How am I going to make that happen? And, you just go for it. You find somebody that does know how to do that, and you figure out, what does it take? Is there any way that you can learn to engage with it? Can you actually pick up skills yourself along the process, or maybe sometimes you encounter some high level skills that are so far and above and beyond, like I'm not an engineer and I didn't study engineering. And, there are so many people out there who have spent their whole life doing that there are some problems and challenges. I would rather just go to an engineer and have them solve it because, if I screw it up, it could be dangerous. Or if I screw it up, I don't want to spend my life working on these math problems. I want to make art. And at the end of the day, like, I think what I had to realize was, for me, art is about experience and realizing the best version of that experience I can. And if that means I have to collaborate or work with others or hire people to do certain things, then I will do that. And, a lot of people are very gracious in sharing their time and energy as well. People like Peter at the Halifax Makerspace, that's exactly what the Halifax Makerspace was about. It was about teaching people who are interested in these skills so that they could work towards a project. I think most people that come into those spaces are usually coming with, smaller projects in mind, but I think Peter really liked the grand ambition of what I was trying to do. And he loved it because, at the end of the day, I ended up putting his name on the wall of the museum. And so I was able to give him access to a cultural institution that he'd grown up going to, that he would have never been able to have seen himself inside of otherwise. And I think that relationship was really beautiful in a sort of, mutually beneficial way, where, all parties involved actually saw something and got something from it. And at the end of the day, he taught me a great amount. A lot of those skills I ended up taking with me to graduate school. And now I can do a fair amount of stuff using the Arduino platform just on my own. I'm still by no means like very advanced the way people like May are, for instance, who've come from that sort of very technical background. Mm-hmm. But I think the important thing is learning enough to know, what does it mean, how does it work, and what can I use it for? And then when I hit a roadblock, who can I go to get me through it? And that's really kind of where I think the heart of collaboration, good collaborations, lie, in my personal experience.
Great, thank you. I think you really answered like the question, and I open it because I feel that our students, they have the chance to develop certain projects in collaboration with another departments, and as you said, it's an exchange from science and art that give both sides a great option to expand our knowledge, to share and to expand the knowledge in both ways, science,
Absolutely.
art, and art and science,
something else that I wanted to say is, I've gone to a lot of artist lectures, and I've seen a lot of famous artists that I admire give these presentations. And I'm always frustrated when I see them show these like super polished and perfect works, and they don't talk about like the thousands of people they have working underneath them.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's totally ridiculous if you start working in certain cultural institutions and spaces, and you're doing projects at the scale that you're doing them at, and you don't recognize the fact that you have a team of people helping you. And a lot of them end up being volunteers, and people doing it just because they love doing it, or because they're students, or they're working towards something on their own, or maybe they're being paid. But I always remember the lectures that I go to where I see that. And for me, I think it's important as an artist to sort of acknowledge like all the people that help us do what we do. And at the end of the day, it might be my vision. This might be like a Dylan Fish project, but I think there's always going to be, like, I would always like to acknowledge all the people that are there helping me make that possible. So.
Thank you. Yes, let's open the mic to the public so we hear like other ideas and questions that you would like to ask to Dylan. I will speak a little bit in Spanish to open up. Bueno, para quienes quieran preguntarle algo a Dylan de lo que nos mostró, de su proceso. Acuérdense que el chat está abierto para que ustedes escriban sus preguntas y se las hagamos saber. ¿Alguien por ahí quisiera preguntarle algo a Dylan sobre lo que vimos, sobre sus tejidos, sobre sus codificaciones? El micrófono está abierto. Demos unos minutos. ¿Alguien por allí quisiera preguntarle a Dylan sobre su práctica? Pierdan la timidez. Bueno, while they start asking us, I would like to ask you another thing, more like related to your, like the work, no, not the process behind the work, but the work itself. Like for me, it's very interesting how you started like really thinking about social media, Facebook, digital platforms, but you were in the first project really into the medium of fabrics of textiles. And while we were navigating the recent projects, politics became really important, no? And I remember when I invited you to this lecture, you were very, very excited of what was going on with this piece, no? In China, how the context really changes the importance and the power of the work itself, no? So I would like you to talk to us a little bit more about that, no? This piece that you did first for the MFA program, no? How it really grows so much when it changed to China, and when suddenly the encrypted messages in this pandemic time took another like weight, no?
I mean, I kind of wonder also if like if it's kind of crazy, you know, because I know that there's so much control that's exerted over these types of things, and I have always been very cautious not to be too blatant about what I think the work, how I think the work could be interpreted. I think the nice thing about art is that we all interpret it our own way. So we come up to something like this, it's incredibly abstract, it's incredibly intense. Like if you see an installation like this, you know, I think a lot of viewers are going to see something like this and they're going to go, I don't get it. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And, you know, you really have to engage with it to sort of unravel like its mysteries and break into it. And I do think that that is a problem that my work, especially like my more recent work, has. But at the end of the day, I want to make something so visually engaging that people are willing to spend the time to play with the computer and figure out what it is and what's going on. And in terms of how that's interpreted, you know, I think that like for me, the context of this work being in China is so much more significant than it ever was in the US. Because in the US, you know, free speech is so crazy that, you know, people are just saying the most outlandish stuff every day, and, you know, without any, you know, fear of repercussions or, you know, the sort of harm that, you know, what they're putting out into the world can cause. And on the other side of the spectrum, you see a country like China, which is so intense in the way that it enforces what can and cannot be said. You know, I don't necessarily think either of those things are like phenomenal the way that we've seen them play out. And, you know, I'm like a really moderate kind of guy. Like, you know, I think extremes are stuff that we should really try and avoid. But I think these conversations are really worth having. And so I like the work as something that can open up those conversations, but not give answers. You know, I don't want to prescribe to the audience like how I really feel about these things, and I don't want anybody to assume they know my thoughts and feelings on these things. I just want them to think about them as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, veamos. Let's see if there's someone asking, someone that is not shy to pop up some questions in the chat. ¿Alguien quisiera preguntarle a Dylan? Aprovechemos que está aquí. Sobre los procesos de su obra, sobre la obra en sí, sobre la codificación, sobre los textiles, sobre cómo están hechos, sobre la experiencia en China. Creo que es una buena oportunidad para, bueno, acercarnos a los artistas, a sus procesos. Alguien que se anime. Yo creo que para los artistas que mostramos nuestro trabajo es súper enriquecedor también escuchar del público sus opiniones, lo que sintieron, las dudas, comentarios, siempre nos enriquece mucho. Ojalá rompamos el hielo y alguien se anime. ¿Alguien por allí? So they are shy on the other side of the screen. I think
it's
someone.
No worries. I take no offense to that. I completely understand.
Someone is throwing Vero Ramirez is saying that she likes a lot to see your work and to listen. The question that she has for you is, do you think that the language in codification is important?
The language in what?
Codification, like encoding language, is important?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like how to interpret that. I think language in general is, and I'm not sure if I'm really answering this question, so forgive me if I'm not, but to me, language it's like the most important thing that we have. It's how we communicate with one another, and it can be the basis of, you know, two people coming to a mutual agreement, or two people, you know, wanting to kill each other. And with art and visual culture, all we're doing is expressing in the same way. And I think what's really fascinating about art is that everybody compares art to language, even though it's not necessarily one. And I think that in terms of, you know, codes and, you know, concealing and revealing things, either through any format, whether it's symbols, signs, like encrypted formats, or you know, really simple, you know, blinking lights. I think that there's something fascinating about that, like the need to communicate information and not necessarily have everyone know about it. Mm-hmm. Is sometimes the difference between life and death for many people. And, you know, I think sometimes when we hide things through language or through code, it speaks volumes about what is actually important in the world. And that for me is a fascinating subject. And I think that's part of my obsession with language in general and art in general.
And I think in that sense, the piece, like in China, like the possibility to say it loud but encrypted what was going on in a very difficult moment, it's kind of a release, no? Like the possibility of coding what we want to say, but maybe we cannot say.
Absolutely. I think having a system where people can write whatever they want and have no fear of repercussions is
Mhm.
kind of exhilarating, I think, for somebody that's used to not living that. And I know in China, like when people text, they do text in sometimes in codes with numbers because there are some things that you can't say. So certain numbers become stand-ins for certain words that would otherwise be registered by a database.
Yeah, that's
And
super
it's
interesting.
kind of that kind of authority is a little intense, I think, for anybody coming from like a Western civilization, and like yeah, it's just, I think for me too, I'm really love George Orwell's writing, and I think that he was writing in the early 1950s, and the stuff that he's written about is just incredibly prophetic in terms of predicting, I think, some of the major issues that have underpinned our current moment.
Thank you, Vila. And thank you, Vera. I think it really opened a very important topic in Dylan's work, no? The coding and the importance and the power and the poetry and the materiality of coding, no?
Yeah, it can be very poetic too, like in the case of your work, Nuria. Like I think that like the way that you, or at least back when we were sharing a wall, I remember you were exploring like similar themes in completely different directions. So
Thank you, Vila. Very sweet
but I think
point
that
out.
boils down to like a hard truth of like what art is about, and in your case you were exploring lost languages, and I think that again, that idea of a lost language speaks volumes to what's important and missing in our society.
Someone else has a question. It's a good moment. I know that sometimes when we have the space, we are like suddenly in white. No, we don't know anything. What can we answer? But let's do it. Last minute, someone. Majo. Majo was the one that threw out the question, and she was my student. So thank you, Majo. Someone else, some of my students out there have a question, you can do it, write it in Spanish, and I can translate it if that's easier for you. And if not, thank you so much, Dylan, for your time, for your generosity. I thank you very much. For me, it was great to see all your evolution.
Thank you
and
for
transformation.
Having me. It was really nice to do this. So.
Bueno, pues si el público ya no tiene más preguntas, damos por cerrada la sesión. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que se conectaron y a Dylan por mostrarnos su trabajo. Que tengan una lindísima noche y bueno, pues aquí nos despedimos. Thank you, Dylan. So we finish, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, Nuria, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sí, I want to continue
absolutely
sharing, and hopefully next time you come to Mexico.
Yes, I would like that very much.
Bueno, yo espero que se desconecten todos, pero thank you very much.